Welcome to The Third Story. I'm your host, Leo Sidran. Today's guest is boice-Terrel Allen, known generally to his public simply as Boice. I first became aware of him and his podcast, Talk Music Talk, a little over a year ago when a publicist pitched me on an interview and made a very strong case for why their artist would be a good candidate for me to talk to. But rather than addressing the email to me, it was addressed to Boice. Dear Boice, I've got somebody I think you'd like to talk to. And I thought, well, now who is this Boice and what does this mean? So I Googled Boice Music Podcast, and I discovered that he also has a podcast, Talk Music Talk, based in New York, just like mine, in which he talks to a variety of musical artists and music-adjacent people, spanning multiple genres, some very established, others still developing, all kinds of people, without attachment to category, very diverse. I felt like we had a kind of sympathetic sensibility. I loved that his approach is one of real curiosity. Sometimes, in fact, I've listened to him and been inspired, and other times I've been kind of frustrated. Frustrated in that way that you feel when you compare yourself to somebody else, when you do something similar to someone else, and you kind of listen with a heightened curiosity, with a heightened awareness of what's happening. Why is he able to make his guests feel so comfortable? What does he say to them before the tape starts rolling? What's his vibe like in the room? So I reached out to him and suggested that we meet. And we never did meet until this conversation. But in the meantime, we did begin a kind of correspondence, if you can call it that. If text messages count, then we've got a good correspondence going. And I came to learn that he works at the Strand Bookstore in New York and has subsequently started a second podcast called the Strandcast that features in-depth conversations with authors. And additionally, I came to learn that he's released 2 albums as a singer-songwriter, and he's written 2 books. So he's a creative searcher, and we have a lot of crossover. We've even talked to some of the same guests, and not the obvious ones. Like, for example, we talked to the same music therapist. He's had some guests I would still love to have, and some I never even thought to ask. Sometimes I wonder if this, hosting a podcast, is a form of journalism, or a form of self-discovery, a kind of exhibitionism, a kind of self-guided graduate education, or all of the above. Whatever it is, it's certainly a journey. And one of the beautiful aspects of having the podcast is that I'm able to follow up any little interesting lead, pull on any thread, like this one today with Boice. This episode is being released as his 200th episode of Talk Music Talk with Boice, and I'm also posting it in the Third Story feed. So it's one of those cross-pollination, synergistic, two birds situations. In the conversation, we cover both his personal and professional development, starting as a boy in Pittsburgh and moving not once, not twice, but 3 times to New York before it finally stuck. We also compare notes on podcast life, techniques, strategies, ambitions. But beyond that, we get a sense of who Boice is, something that he expertly manages not to fully reveal on his own podcast, despite the intimate nature of his interviews. Third-story.com is the place to go for all your Third Story podcast needs. Sign up, subscribe, check the archive, the episode index, all of that fun stuff. While you're there, you can also click the button to Patreon or go directly to patreon.com/thirdstorypodcast. That's where you can get involved on a deeper level, put some skin in the game, put your cards on the table, and support an ongoing creative endeavor such as this one. I should remind you also that if you like this sort of thing, you can subscribe on the podcast app and be a subscriber. It's a helpful thing. It makes sure that you are always notified when a new episode is released, and lately they've been weekly. In fact, I want to remind you that we still have a couple of weeks left this year, and I've got some sweet surprises in store. A special Hana Chrismica bonus coming next week that I'm especially happy to share with you. So here it is, my conversation with Boice.
Okay. Yeah, because somebody who I work with, they're starting their own podcast.
Yeah.
And they were like, what do you do when you're setting up? I'm like, well, usually I try to make small talk because I don't want anything important to come up before we're recording.
You can't get it back, you know?
Yeah. So I'm like, oh, this is a cool neighborhood. I've never been here before. How are you?
Do you find, though, that even a question like this is a cool neighborhood could potentially open up? Yes, it's potential.
Yeah.
Well, let's just do this.
Okay. So I'm excited.
Boice, congratulations on 200 episodes.
Thank you.
Talk Music Talk. What does that sound like to you when you hear that?
200, it immediately makes me think, like, okay, it's 5 years, right? And I think I've told this story at an event that I did at Strand, live podcast. But I had wanted to do what was it? Manhattan Neighborhood Network was starting having classes. So I had barely been on Facebook, and that's how I found out. I was just like, I'm going to go on Facebook, right? Go on Facebook, and I see that there's informational meetings for it, right? And there was an afternoon one. Now, this is in the depth of my depression. So, but I'm like, I'm going to go and do it, right? So I go to get up, and I'm like, I can't go. I just could not get the energy to go. And I was like, why you want to have a talk show? I was going to do like something, video talk show, YouTube's talk show. And I'm like, what are you going for? You're like, you've never done this before other than DJing in college. Why, all this stinking thinking. So I didn't go to it. And then I was really upset with myself. I knew there was an evening one. I'm like, well, you got to go to the evening one, boys. So I forced myself and go to the evening one. And while I'm sitting there, they're like, oh, well, you're going to need a crew and all these moving parts to do your own show.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, I can do that, but I'm impatient. Because like you got to take classes too to be certified there. I'm like, what if you start a podcast? Because I was deep into podcasts. I'm like, you can do that by yourself.
Yeah.
And you don't need a crew, and you can just be independent and do that. And that was like the birth of, the podcast. And like immediately like, oh, you can do a talk show. Okay, you can do a talk show with music. Yeah. And like that was the night. So like thinking about the 200th episode in 5 years, like I always go back to that, because like if I hadn't gone to either session, like, things would have been so different. Like it was like an important part of like a fork in the road, kind of like what would have happened if I hadn't gone that direction.
What would have happened? I mean, you said you were going through depression. What?
Yeah. It was like the kind of depression that you could get up out of bed and go to the gym and do, things like that. But like you didn't really want to get out of bed. And like, if people looked at you, they wouldn't think, oh, Boyce is depressed. Right. So it was kind of that depression where you can get up and do things, but like just internally, you don't necessarily feel like your best.
Right. Well, so 5 years ago, as best as I can tell, you were really defining yourself publicly as a singer-songwriter. You were making records.
Yeah, doing more of that. Yeah, because I did publish several books, and then I had writer's block, and then I got into the music. I moved to New York, and I had like a great guitar teacher, and this guitar teacher had a studio in his home. And from there, he was like, one of his assignments was, I was learning how to play guitar. And one of his assignments was that you had to write your own song. And he's like, come in with a verse and a chorus. That's it. So the week passed. I would meet every week. The week comes, and I could not come up with anything. So, and I also had a lesson to learn too. And he was like, well, where's your song, Boyce? I'm like, well, I was busy practicing this other stuff you gave me. He's like, that's bullshit. He's like, next week, I want the song. Yeah. So it's like, from there, I'm like, okay, well, I got to do the song. I mean, it's a waste of money if I'm not doing what he's asking me to do. And that's what started, that was a dream of mine to have an album. Right. And from then on, it like the floodgates just opened. Like every week, I'm like just coming up with a song. Because every week he's like, write me a new song. Write me a new song. And then like in hour, 2 hours, we would come up with a demo. Yeah. And it was like, I'm an impatient person. Yes. So it just totally like worked into like, wait, I can come up with a song in a week and then like meet with him for an hour, 2 hours and have a song. Oh, and have like great. A record, like have a song like it's on a record. Yeah. Well, okay, so already what we know is that you're impatient and you're kind of, and you're a person of varied interests, right? I mean, as you said, you'd already written novels. We're going to have to talk about all of this. And then you were making records and writing songs, and then kind of, it sounds like somewhat spontaneously you started a podcast, which has now defined your life for 5 years. I mean, if we can go all the way back, I think we have to go all the way back. We have to go back to Pittsburgh, I guess. Yes. I guess tell me, like, what kind of kid were you, and what did you want for yourself? What did you think you were going to do? Only child, always creative. I always knew I wanted to do something in entertainment, but I wasn't exactly sure how that would look or what that would look like. But it's always something, like, I love music. That was always my passion. So I guess I didn't, know exactly, or I didn't have anyone who could say to boys, oh, here's how the path you could take, right? And probably, I mean, I wouldn't have known what path to take. So it felt like by the time I got to college, well, if I go to communications, that is a path to take. And I knew that you could be a DJ at college. So that was like, okay, I'm going to be a college DJ. Because I'd been in the band my high school band. Like probably from, God, maybe, no, I started playing clarinet in grade school, and then high school band. I was drum major.
Yeah.
And you had to audition for college to be on the band.
Yeah.
And I had never learned how to read music. I was playing by ear.
The whole time?
Yes, the whole time. I played trombone.
Yeah.
And so I could not get audition. And then I was intimidated by it. But I'm like, I'm going to be a college radio DJ. And there was a program I was in, I think, was it called Bridge? But it was like a bridge program between high school and college. And the first, I think it was like a 6 to 8 week program. I get up there and I already have it in my mind, I'm going to be a DJ. So I go up to find out where the college station is, 4th floor, WPTS FM. I go up there and there's a guy sitting behind the counter, and I'm just really bashful and shy from a small town because I'm like outside of Pittsburgh. And I go to him like, I want to be I'm going to be on the DJ, DJ on the station. What do I need to do? And he's like, oh, this is the perfect time. It's summer. Nobody's here. I'll train you. And over the summer, he trained me, and then I was able to have a show in the fall, and that was the thing that like set being able to be creative in addition to the communications program. So
and connected you to music. I mean,
yes,
you like
and
music
like directly to it, like being able to. It was a freeform show, so you got to create the type of show you wanted. And I come to that my style was, and choosing music was very melodic because I love hooks, and that you can do that in many genres of music. So
you started to see that there was a kind of an aesthetic or a point of view that was outside of any specific genre.
Yes.
All different kinds of music that spoke to you.
Yeah, because I loved all that kind of music. Like my grandmother, I got like, she loved gospel and jazz and blues. And then I had my aunt and my uncle who lived with us, so they were listening to like funk and R&B, and then everything else I was discovering my own. So it was like all this stuff was just like
so interesting. Only child, but with your aunt and uncle living in the house also.
Yes, with my aunt, my uncle, my mom, my granddad, my grandma. Yes.
How interesting. It's funny because like when you describe, I'm an only child also. When you describe only child, I picture my childhood, which is actually a very small nuclear family.
Yeah.
You're actually coming from a large family.
Yeah.
It's just you're the only kid.
Yeah, the only kid. Yeah.
So what did they think of you wanting to be in entertainment or wanting to be in communications or music or any of that?
It was always very encouraging.
Yeah.
And like my grandmother is a big influence on me. She loved music. Like the end of every podcast I go, this one's for you, Liz. So that's my grandmother, Elizabeth Allen. And she's like was the first person that, I saw who just listened to all types of music, and that it wasn't that one music wasn't better than the other, that pop music was just as important as as jazz. Like she never made any differentiation between any of these music. So like she was really influential in like me liking all types of music and like singing them on the same level.
Yeah, one thing I notice about your podcast and I really admire is that you'll jump between like a very established famous person and then somebody like you've interviewed a number of people who I consider them to be just kind of working it out still, just coming, that I would have never thought to interview them, but of course they make just as compelling a story, sometimes even more compelling stories to talk to people that are still developing or are absolutely fantastic and just not as well known or successful.
Because for me, it's like if I like the music, that's sort of the number one thing, in that everybody has a story to tell, and that for music, people usually aren't doing that because there's 5 generations of people and you better do music. It's not like other careers.
That's right.
In fact, many parents are probably swaying you not to go into music. So if you're going to go into music, it's because you love it, you're passionate about it, and I think it's a way of showing that however you get to do that there's a journey and sacrifice and challenges, and somehow you figured out how to do this, whether it's your full-time profession or you have 5 jobs to do it. It takes you 2 years to complete your album, that you're doing it, and that I get inspired every episode, every person I meet to keep going and not give up because they haven't done it. So
that's right. So you're on the radio at college. You have your first degree is a communications degree, and then what?
Well, it was always in my mind, I got to move to New York.
Yeah. Why?
If you're going to be in entertainment, you have to be in New York. And as I was saying to you before the interview, I interviewed R.L. Stein today for the Strand podcast.
Yes.
And he was saying the same thing, like in the 60s, like, well, you got to move to New York if I want to be a writer. And he's like, I don't know where I got that in my head. You got to go to New York.
Yeah.
So it's like applied to NYU, and that was like the only school like outside of Pittsburgh I applied to, and I didn't get in. But then so I went to University of Pittsburgh, and I think it was probably best that I had like a school that wasn't as big and lost in the city, because I ended up going to NYU for grad school, but I still was able at Pitt to have the campus experience, which I feel like going to NYU, you definitely didn't have that. It's like you're just right in the city. You only know you're in college if you're inside a college building.
Oh, yeah. And I think New York, if you come at the wrong time, it will eat you alive.
Yes. And I would have gotten...
swallowed.
Nibbled up and everything.
So, but did you come for school then, or you moved here first and then eventually went to
NYU?
NYU?
After school I went to... I had a job working at... for this, God, you're making me really think. It was for this company that had it was a Healthy Start Now. It was a health program. And I was the producer for their radio station, associate producer on their radio.
So you were doing radio.
Yeah, I was doing radio. So I was always trying to do things that were connected. So from there, then I moved to New York right after there. So it was actually, this time is my third time. Yes, it didn't stick.
It didn't stick.
First time I moved to New York. And I realized that as an only child, I had been spoiled, and I didn't know how to do anything for myself. You know, like I think back, I was moved into an apartment in Brooklyn, and I went to the grocery store, and I'm like, okay, what is? I don't know how to cook. I'm in the frozen food section. Like, how do you cook chicken? It's just raw chicken. I've never had to do that. And pasta, how you cook? Yeah, so I'm eating just junk food and like microwave food and stuff like that. So, and so I ended up going back home for like, I stayed there like 9 months the first time, and then came back for grad school. I got into grad school, and then came back from grad school, and I was in Pittsburgh for 8 years. Yes. And then went back, and then the third time stuck.
So grad school was for writing?
It's for broadcast journalism.
So you were on the path to be a journalist. You were kind of positioning yourself to be a journalist.
It was partially getting to New York, or whatever that took.
Right.
And school would do that.
Right.
And broadcast journalism seemed more like a fit, because I wanted to do something more voice-wise. Right. As opposed, because they had a print journalism and magazine journalism section as well. But it was doing something with my voice, because I knew I wanted a talk show then. Yeah, because I'm a big Oprah fan. So
Oprah was one of the early influences on where we are now.
Yes. As my friend Ari says, Oprah is my Jesus.
Oprah's your Jesus.
Yes, he says this in a song of his, right?
Oh, your friend Ari
Gold. Yeah, I interviewed
Sir Ari Gold. Yes.
Yes, Sir Ari Gold. Yes, and he has that in a song.
What was it about Oprah? What was it that you loved about Oprah?
I like to think it was sort of a metaphysical type thing, because I loved her before, like, she had even went, like, once they announced the show was going national, and I was, like, just fascinated. I had no idea why. Yeah. And I'd always loved talk shows. I would, watch Johnny Carson and who else? Tom Snyder. So there was, like, I was always watching talk shows, but I never had made the connection, like, oh, that's something that I could do myself. It wasn't until I saw Oprah that I'm like, oh, okay, that's something that people can go after and do. And then I don't know why I hadn't made that connection before, but like once she did that was even my my essay to get into grad school for NYU. Was I went to have a talk show, and I was inspired by Oprah, and I actually didn't get in at first because I was supposed to go up to NYU for my interview to get into school, and I don't know what the mix-up was. So I go from Pittsburgh, I go to New York, and I go to the admissions office, and I'm like, I'm here for my interview. And they're like, we don't have you scheduled for anything. What are you talking about? You're crazy, boys. And I'm like, well, I talked to someone on the phone, and they're like, well, you're not scheduled for anything. And they're like, why don't you go over to the journalism department, and maybe it's there, they'll know something. So they tell me where to go, walk over to journalism department, and go upstairs, and the woman behind the desk, Janet Walker, and I tell her, I applied, I thought I was having an interview, and she's like, no, we don't have you scheduled either. So I'm like really disappointed, because I've come from Pittsburgh to do this. And she's like, well, let me go and find your folder, your file, and see what's going on. So the folder's there. She goes to the file cabinet, and she pulls my folder, and she's flipping through it, and she's like, I'm sorry you didn't make it. They rejected you. And I'm like sitting there like ready to cry, because I want to move to New York, and I hate Pittsburgh, and I don't know what I'm going to do now. Life is over. And she's like, I'm like, well, do you know why? And she's like, they said that because you want to have a talk show. And I'm like, well, what is it? And I'm thinking that looking back now, this was sort of like the whole like trash TV talk shows, and maybe they thought that, even though I mentioned Oprah. And she was like, I don't think anyone should be faulted for having a dream. She's like, I'm pretty cool with the director of the program. Let me talk to him.
Really?
Yeah. She's like, go back home. And she go, you're going to hear from me. I'll let you know something. So I get a call from her like a week later, and she's like, you're in. So I don't know what she said or did. And she's like, you'll be getting a formal letter and all that, right? And that's how I got into NYU, because of Janet Walker. So
thank you, Janet Walker.
Yes. And I end up being her assistant for work study.
It sounds though that like you might have been compelled to, and maybe you still are somewhere, to be on camera. I
think so, yeah. And like the only reason why I hadn't done the show is because it was like so much work. And then once I got involved in doing the podcast, it was just like, it's a lot of moving pieces to do something with video. And I think also I like with the podcast is I feel like people in some ways can be more open if there's not a camera on them, and then they don't have to worry about their looks, and that they can be a little more candid and open in that way. So
I think about that all the time, and I think video show is not a podcast with a camera. I mean, I think it's a different animal. You know? I've thought about that a lot. But so we started out this conversation just when we started rolling, talking about what you do when you show up in somebody's space, because you have to travel to talk to people.
Yes.
So that's one thing that Oprah never really had to do.
She should try it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that came out of necessity because at the time, I'm telling you everything. Yeah. Where part of the depression was like I was living somewhere where it was supposed to be temporary, and I was sleeping on a futon next to the kitchen. Yeah. So I couldn't have people come there and interview. And so I'm like, well, what am I going to do? It's like, oh, well, if you have portable equipment, then you can travel wherever. Not knowing that actually ended up being a plus, because that way I could get interviews if people didn't have to leave their home. Like, it was very convenient for people. Like, oh, no, you can just come to me? Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Someone's visiting you can, in my hotel or, rehearsal hall, whatever. And it's like it actually made it quite easier being able to just travel to people.
Do you find that the physical space that you are sitting in changes the feeling or the nature of the conversation?
I think actually people are probably more comfortable if they can do it in their home. I think what changes it is if when people have other people in the room, which my preference is not, just to have one-on-one, because I think the other person, they have a relationship with the person already, that changes the nature. So I'm always like, if we can just do this one-on-one, that's my preference.
Yes. But I mean, in terms of like your ability to lock in with somebody, you have to be incredibly focused, right? When you walk into it, you have to set up your technical stuff and then get in there. And you're in a completely new space every time. So what does it feel like for you when you walk through that unfamiliar door every time? What's going through your head and in your body when you do that?
I'm like always like, okay, just praying and chanting for like the perfect interview. And like once I sit down, it becomes so mindful. Yeah. That I'm not thinking about anything else. Yes. Like once I set up and put the headphones on, like it makes it impossible to think. Like I'm thinking about, the sound, and I'm looking at the time and all that stuff, but it doesn't take away from the focus in the interview. Like, but really nothing else matters in that moment. And I think people find that too when they're interviewing, because they're not looking at the time. And then like when they're done, they're like, oh wait, we spoke for an hour? Yes. How is that possible? Yes. Because it's like when you're being mindful, time just sort of flies by because you have nothing else on your mind to think about but what's right in front of you, which is answering questions.
That's right. Yeah. It is like a kind of meditation that you go into with somebody, right? Mm-hmm. You go into a space with them. Yeah. What do you tell people when you approach them? What's your pitch, or what do you say to people?
I have a form letter, right? So I've had this like from the beginning. So I'm spilling all my secrets. Mm-hmm. At the beginning, so I find out who I want to interview. Then I have at the beginning basically, I admire this, your old music or whatever, your book. And then it goes into, I would love to have a sit-down, face-to-face conversation with you for my podcast. And then there's a paragraph about the podcast, and then past guests. And then, like, I found, like, you keep updating the list. People are like, oh, I know that person. Oh, wait. And that makes it easier to get guests, too. And they're like, oh, I know that person.
Do you do you give the whole list of
I give it selected, so it's not the whole list. But, yeah. And they have the links to the show and everything, which I find often. I don't know if you found this, where people don't listen to the podcast before doing an interview.
Well, I became aware of your podcast because a publicist wrote to me and addressed it to Boyce. And I said, who's Boyce? And I Googled and I found your podcast, and I felt like here's another person who has a very similar attitude about genre and freedom within creation, and then also within the format of podcasting, where you could kind of do whatever you want. I love that you said music without genre, without borders. You know, I mean, I totally related to all of that. But I hadn't been getting pitched for quite a while, and then one day I started getting pitched, you know, and now I do. But what I find is that sometimes when I get pitched, the people that I talk to particularly are the ones who haven't listened and haven't figured out, and they think that it's just a pure promotional thing. And what I loved about your podcast when I found it also is that you'll talk about whatever, you know, the project is, but you also are talking about kind of the bigger story of people's lives also.
Yeah, because it's kind of fun not knowing. That's a part of what I love about the long form interview and the type I do, is that you don't know what's going to happen.
Yes.
So like I have my opening question, like after I've researched them, the opening question, and then whatever the new project is, and whatever happens between that, I'm open to it.
So those are the two kind of points that you want to hit in every interview.
Yeah, like how am I going to open it?
Yeah,
and to explore something they may not have talked about before. You know, like I interviewed Antonio Sanchez.
Yes.
So my first question was, you made me love drum solos.
Yes.
How'd you do that?
Yes.
And like you could see the look on his face, like, oh, I've never been asked that question before. And he like chuckled.
Yes.
Yeah, there was silence for a moment, and then he chuckled. Because I'm sure it was like the last question he would have ever expected to be asked. So there's a lot of like thought into what's going to be that. So when I'm researching, I'm looking for what is the opening question going to be.
And what kind of research do you do?
It depends. So for someone like him, he's done so much, right? Like I interviewed Vijay Iyer, and a long time ago.
Yep, I saw.
And it was saying, and this was the first time I really realized where like he has like pages and pages of stuff that he's done, and then you realize, and after I read it, I'm like, I still don't know anything about him. Yeah. Like all these statistics and awards and achievements tells you nothing.
That's right.
About him. So I go to the interview and it's like, you know, we're talking about how he got into Herbie Hancock. Yeah. And he had mentioned, you know, it was through Rocket first. And then it came to him like, you know, did you ever break dance? And there was like that moment like, oh, this is not like other interviews. Okay, no one's asked me about breakdancing before. And it's like you could just tell like that moment where he just like opened up. Right. Yeah. Because you think about, if you go to a party and what is the number one question New Yorkers, or maybe anywhere, ask, what do you do?
What do you do?
So by the end of the night, 20 people ask you this question. You're answering it the same way. Yes. But if someone asks you a different question, like, oh, well, do you love what you do? Or is this a passion of yours? You now have to think and not answer that question in the same way. Yes. Yeah. So there's like research like that, but then other people who, you know, if they're new artists, they may not have anything. And like, I love that. It's kind of like jazz because you don't know what's going to happen. Yeah, you just have to find out everything in the spot. You know? Yes. All you have is their music.
Yes. And at the end of the day, all you have is the moment anyway.
Yeah.
With the JI or whoever it is, all you have is that moment, what they're going to give to you.
And like the achievements and all that doesn't tell you anything about them, so it may not necessarily like help you get the best interview just because you know all these facts about them.
Right. How did you start? Who did you reach out to? What kinds of people did you reach out to at first? I mean, I listened to a couple of early interviews. And I noticed that you were friends with a lot of the people.
Yes, because that was easy.
Yeah, that's who you get first is your friends.
Yeah, because the first person I interviewed,
see if you can get it.
DiCarlo.
You got there before I did.
Okay.
DiCarlo.
Yeah, so I knew her from Pittsburgh, and she lived in Jersey, and so I went out there for the interview, and it's my first. I'm like so nervous. I researched her and everything, and get out there, ring the doorbell, and there's no answer, right? And I ring the doorbell again, and it was like pretty inconvenient going out to Jersey, and she lived like a 10-15 minute walk from the bus station or whatever. And she doesn't answer, and I'm like almost relieved that she didn't answer. I'm like, so I'll have to reschedule. I don't have to do it. This is actually good. I don't have to relay. And I'm like, well, let me try more time. So I like didn't, and this is another thing I do now is get people's phone numbers before I go to an interview. I contact her on Facebook, and she was home, but she hadn't heard the doorbell. So she comes and answers the door, and then we do the interview, and I had all my like questions written out at the time because I thought that's what I was going to be doing. Yeah. And I asked her the first question, and then it was like an hour later, and I remember I never looked down to see what the rest of the questions were.
You never saw the second question.
No.
You never read the second question.
And it was just like, oh my God. It was like an epiphany, like, oh, okay, so I don't have to rely on writing 20 questions to interview the person.
Why did you think that writing questions down would be the way to approach it?
I guess because I was scared.
Yeah.
Because I had not done long form conversations. I'm like, well, that's a long 45. And we end up talking like an hour or something like that.
Yeah.
And I realized like, oh, you don't necessarily need all those questions. And sometimes they can keep you from the moment. Like working at Strand, I see like events where people have their friends interview them and they'll have their questions and they ask the question and then the person answers and there's like 10 other questions they could have asked from that response and then they move on to their next question.
Yeah.
And it's like you've missed all this stuff because you're not in the moment being mindful.
But that also raises a question for me if it's maybe more of a challenge to interview people that you know a little too well because you know so much about them.
Yes.
It's like hard to be in the moment and box it into an interview with your friends.
Since you know these people you're interviewing, you have to think about the person listening. Like you can just say it in one sentence to take care of it, but it's like he didn't ask the follow-up question and I wouldn't know the follow-up question and he didn't ask because he already knows the answer.
Well, it seems like that's where your journalistic background comes from, you know, that you are essentially, even though this is a kind of an informal format, the podcast can sort of be anything you want it to be. You're engaging in basically a form of journalism.
Yes.
Do you feel that you are representing your audience? You're a proxy for your audience, or are you doing this for you?
It's a little of both. I mean, because it's selfish in that is my interest. I'm going in the moment what I want to know, and I'm hoping that people will be interested in that. But I feel like it's almost a hindrance if you're thinking, oh, what is this? What do these other people want to know or hear? And that because then it can become this interview where like you're asking questions that you may not necessarily care about because you're thinking, oh well, all these other people want to know the answer. So I'm trying to follow like what are my interests in that moment, and that makes it unique because it's like what I'm thinking about in that moment and what I want to know.
Have you ever walked into an interview where you know that there's like some sensitive spots with the person and you feel like you know you probably should go there, but you don't know what you're going to find when you go there? Like I've sometimes been in situations where I'm like, I feel like I have to ask this question, but I know if I do, it's like it could go one of two ways.
I've not had that where I've known in advance, but there's been interviews where people were like talking about like, you know, one singer, she kept saying, you know, and I had this private personal problem. Yeah. And then she mentioned the second time. Yeah. And I'm like, finally, what was this personal problem? Because I'm thinking if she doesn't want to tell me, that's fine, or we can edit it out. Yeah. And like she was fine when she said, you know, what it was, but it was just like it was so glaring or maybe it's not glaring to people listen. Maybe that's the thing. Other people may listen and not think it's good, but to me, it immediately was like, well, what is she talking about? Yeah. And I found that if your intention is like, my intention is for guests to feel good. Yes. That this is a pleasant experience for them. I want them to walk away happy from it. Yes. And I figure like if you have that intention, you can ask people pretty much anything. Yeah. Because they feel your intent is pure. It's not, you know, from a gotcha kind of place. Yes. And to shine a light on them, you know. That's basically it, is to just to illuminate people. Yes, I love what you do, and I want to show you in the best light possible. Yes. Why did you define it as a music podcast? Because you are so, you know, you work in a book at the Strand Bookstore, and you obviously have a literary life also. But when you started this podcast, you kind of chose to focus it on music. I figured like having like a focus would kind of brand it from the beginning, like this is a music podcast. Right. And then I was doing my research. I wasn't seeing people who were doing long form interviews, just music and all types of music. Like they may have done one genre of music, and I'm like, okay, well this can make it more special by just focusing on music and not kind of diluting it. Yes. No, I think that's true. What were the podcasts that you were listening to before you started this one? Mark Maron. Yeah. Love Mark Maron. That's your profile picture. You and Mark Maron. Yes. I actually met him twice. Like I met him on the street. Oh, really? Yeah. I stopped him and got a selfie on the street. What'd you say to him? And I was like so nervous. I was on the phone with somebody. And I'm standing in front of my gym, and I'm like, "Wait, is that Mark?" I'm standing up. I'm like, "I think I just see Mark Maron." I'm like, "Hold on!" And I like run over and I'm like, "Excuse me, Mark. I don't mean to bug you." And I'm like, "Can I get a picture with you?" And I'm a big fan of you. He's like, "Sure," like all gruff. Yeah. And take the selfie, and that was it. And then like a few weeks later, he was doing the book signing, and it was like, "Oh yeah, you're on the Lower East Side. I remember now." And did you tell him that you had a podcast? Yes, I did. Yeah. Yes, I did. And I gave him a card. So. And was he an influence? Yes, he was. Like I was looking for influences, like the long form conversation. Like how do you handle it? Like that's part of the the learning is like listening to other people's interviews and like, how do they do it? How do they ask these, when a person's difficult, how do they ask that question? When a person is kind of a sad moment, they're kind of holding back, how do you ask that question? So he was like great resource in like how to interview. Yeah, but like I listened to him. Sound Opinions podcast,
I don't know that one.
It's on public radio in Chicago, and they do interviews and studio performances. So it's kind of like I wanted to do that, like where I have the music, feature the music, have the music at the end, because it's like you should, after you hear the interview, the goal is that you're going to absolutely, even you're like, I hate country music, but I really enjoy that conversation, so I can listen to the music, and that there's a connection to it there, and that even if you don't like the music, you've already heard the conversation and you've gotten something out of that.
That's right. I think that you do a great job of revealing your interest and your point of view without revealing a whole lot about yourself in the conversation.
Yes.
Is that a natural thing for you to lay back like that?
I'm probably like, this is probably the most I've talked. Yeah, I'm probably a more guarded person, and I have to get to know people, because the reason why I did this was to get out of that. Like, I'm always like, if something scares you, that means you have to run towards it, right? So my thing was like, okay, you've not done a long form interview, and how would that feel to be on the other side of it? You don't reveal necessarily as much as yourself, so here's a chance to do that. So this is like,
right,
attacking something head on.
Yes, and you suggested this. I mean, this is an idea that you had. I was wondering about that, like what you, especially because your train ride out here took a little longer than you were thinking, so you had that extra 20 minutes to really reflect before you walk in the door. Like, what am I going to give? What am I going to reveal of myself, especially if it's listeners who have been with you for 200 episodes? Do you think you're an introvert?
Yes, I am. I'm absolutely an introvert. Yeah, because it's where like I don't feel introverted in an interview. I feel very comfortable and in control. But it's like, unless I know you really well, I'm not that. So like I hate chit chat and small talk. So much of conversation is that, and it's like I have no desire to do that. Like I got a ticket to see Jody Watley a few weeks ago, a month ago, maybe a little longer, and I went by myself, which I'm fine with. And the table next to me, the woman's like, "Oh, you're here by yourself?" I'm like, "Yes, I am." And she, "Oh, well, feel free to talk to us." I'm thinking that's not gonna happen. Like that's my natural. I'm not gonna sit in here and make small talk with
some strange person.
Yeah, that's like the worst possible thing I could think of in the world. Yeah.
The one thing that you have in common with this person is that you're at a Jody Watley concert.
Yes. That's let's just leave it at that. Right. But I don't think it's intentional, but I have been thinking about coming out more and speaking more about myself, and so I have been working on it. So that's been something conscious that I want to do, not in a Mark Maron kind of way, right? Which I admire him that he can do that.
Yes. Well, that's kind of why I was thinking about that, because I know you like Maron. I mean,
I didn't get that from him.
Right. No, in fact, I think part of the message of this experience for anybody that gets into it, but certainly for you and for Mark, and is that everybody has to find their way to do it.
Yes. And I don't know what this was like for you, because for me, for so long, it was like, oh, how would Mark answer that question?
Oh, absolutely.
How would Oprah answer that question? How would Terry Gross answer that question? And then I realized I found myself thinking that less and less, where I'm getting into my style. Like when you stop the people you admire, you stop thinking about them during the conversation. And not that doesn't pop up, but that's when you hit your style.
I had Mark Maron on my right shoulder and Terry Gross on my left shoulder for the first 2 years.
And I had a guest that I interviewed. I won't say their name because this is negative about them. But I had interviewed them, and they worked in like PR, and they were going to help me with with social media and all that. And then we were going to meet, and then they sent me an interview like, oh, here's some things, we can talk about beforehand. And like, I'm thinking it's just going to be social media, that type of thing. They're like, oh, well, these are things you should fix with your show. You don't talk as much as your guests. You're getting lost. You should work on that. And I totally had that in my head. So like the next couple of interviews after that, I'm like, well, I'm going to be, for lack of a better word, boisterous in this interview. And I felt like such a fake, such a phony, because that wasn't like, if I got to that naturally and organically, sure. But like I was doing this because I had this voice in my head like, well, this is how you should be as a talk show host. And it's like, well, no, you should be who you want to be, and that people can come to that for that. If they don't like it, there's 600,000 other podcasts they can listen to.
That's right.
They don't have to listen to yours.
That's right.
Yeah.
I feel like you do have a kind of, well, there's a lot about you actually that feels like a brand. Like some of it is the way that you organize the the interviews.
Yeah.
You do reveal a lot about yourself, but you do it in very few words, you know, and it's in the questions that you ask, you know, and the way you respond to people. Like, you refer to yourself only as Boyce.
Yes.
I've never heard you say your full name ever. Say your full name for me.
Boice-Terrel Allen.
Terrell Allen, yeah.
Because I figured that I have it on my books, so people can see it and it's easy. But like when you say Boice-Terrel Allen, it's just like, oh my God, how do you spell? And I figured Boyce is just simple.
Right.
Yeah. And even that, people are like B-O-Y-C-E. Yeah. So.
And you do lowercase b.
Yes. And people always ask why, and the reason why is I don't like a capital B.
You don't like a capital B?
Aesthetically, I've never liked it.
It's a visual thing.
Yes.
So because you hyphenate Boice-Terrel, and then there's a hyphen it.
Hyphen, lowercase b for Boyce, hyphen, and then capital T for Terrell, and then capital.
That's a visual choice that you made with your name.
Totally aesthetics.
Because also Boyce, Oprah, Morrissey, Madonna. You know, these are like iconic. Yeah. It's like you sort of position yourself.
I hope so.
So, but you were thinking about that in a way, like down to the name, the way the name looks.
Yeah, the way a name looks. Yes, and then that's having the one name. You know, talk music, talk with Boyce, is that people don't have to think about all the other names. Like, it's just one name they can attach to. Did you have any sense that maybe you would want to have more than one podcast, that you would want to start expanding it? I hadn't, and then the Strandcast. So I guess people don't know. Or if you're putting this in your intro, you should say. So you have a second podcast. Yeah, the second podcast. We have 4 episodes in. Just recorded 4 more episodes, and I pitched it to Strand Bookstore, to the vice president, and he said yes. I had like a 4-page proposal. Why this great bookstore? Why don't they have a podcast? Right. And so I pitched it, and so it would be easy because I would just be. It was basically like they're syndicating it, right? Right. So I bring it to them ready and everything. Is that I'm just gonna do my show with different music and interview authors. It's an easy format to put together, and that's why I pitched to him, like, you know, here's my podcast, and this is what I'll be doing for the Strand. For me, it's a challenge to get one podcast done. Yeah. How are you organizing your time? I mean, how do you get it done? It's been thrilling. Basically, everything I'm doing now in my life, I like to do. So that's one thing that makes it easy. But my best friend Michael had said to me, this was on my birthday last November 30th, and he had said to me, Boyce, how are you going to do your podcast and the Strandcast? And I was like, I don't know, but I will. So that was my intention, that I will do this. So the way I figured it out was I use my time on the train, like if I need to read or go over research, I can do that on the subway. I have like total like an hour commute on the train. My lunch break, I can record in Strand, so I'll go to a conference room and I can record my intros and outros there, and any work I need to do. So it's like been using like, you know, work time, and then they also give me time to work on the Strandcast too. So that's how I've been doing, is like using these every times minute. Because otherwise I figure like for lunch break for an hour, you eat for like 10 minutes and then you're done eating, and well, now what? So small talk. Yeah. Dreaded small talk. Exactly. So why not use that time? And it feels great. Like, you know, in an hour I can edit a show, and at the end of the line, I've edited a show. Yeah. I feel great. I feel amazing. You have to be listening to music. Reading. And that's the thing. I started doing some author interviews this year also, and to me, the research to talk to an author is so much longer. Yeah, it is. I think just the reading alone, because it's like if I haven't read the book, and there's been some interviews where like, you know, where you get like the last 40, 50 pages, and it's like, but I go into it feeling less confident when I've not read your book to completion. Yes. Even though there's plenty of like national shows where the host has not read the book, he's just been given notes, right? Well, that's another thing, and I think that we're down here in the trenches with no producer to give us these notes. You know, I think about that a lot, and I think when I look at the way you've set your show up, you have to invent all of these systems. You have to invent the whole thing. Yeah. You're a one-man operation. Yeah, because you don't have anyone else to do it for. I mean, other than the actual editing, like I'm doing everything. Yeah. Like, so I have an editor. Oh, you do? Yeah. So, but I still have to listen to the show and give him like any edit points I need made. Yep. So I'm still listening to the show, which is also, I don't know what this is like for you. It's very informative to like work on any tics, and there's things I'm like, oh, you did that. Okay, well, you got to work on that. Okay, you said you're going to work on it. Why are you still doing it? that listening to the show is actually very informative, and it helps me formulate the intro and also to write the show notes. So
Yes.
it's like I have to do that. Like that's an important part. But I have no desire to do the technical editing part. So I send that off to my editor Landon, and he's really genius at doing all that stuff and like quickly, like in 24 hours or something like that.
Have you found a way to make some money from the podcast?
I have still not figured out. It's like my audience has been consistently growing,
Yep.
but not to the point where like I'll get so many listens, but it's
Yep.
never like per show. It's like collectively, and like I need to collectively for per show
Yep.
to be able to hit that. So no, I've not had.
Yep.
I had like a sponsor for headphones, which was nice. This
Yep.
company, so I
Yep.
got a few headphones out of it. But
And is the hope that you can make, I mean, I would assume at some point you'd like to make some
yeah,
money
I would
from it.
like to, or
Yeah.
if it led to like speaking engagement, that type of thing, like other stuff that I got it because of the podcast.
Right.
Like, so I'm open to that too.
So you started writing songs because you had writer's block after having written a novel and then a book of two short novels? Is that what it
Two
was?
novels and novel and stories.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you started the podcast
Mhm.
kind of as an accident, it sort of
Yeah.
sounds like. And now you're talking to writers. Have you thought about writing again?
I do. It's like I want to write a memoir about like the creative life and like why I've not stopped. And I think that's been the most important thing is like staying the course, being persistent, and this feels right, you know, whether that works out or not, but it'll always go in the direction of what feels right. And it was also going to be like a family memoir, and it was probably going to be a little bitter, right?
Why?
Okay, I've talked about it publicly already. Like my mother has narcissistic personality disorder. So I don't know if you're familiar with that.
I mean, I'm
It's,
familiar with our president. Is it?
yes,
is it
so you
related to
have
that? Yeah.
she's not malignant,
Right.
But there's a lack of empathy and conditional love. So there's been that. So I wanted to write a memoir that would incorporate a lot of that. So it's kind of be like I thought of it. My reason for doing it was to inspire people to that you can get through something like that and still achieve your dreams. But probably in a way a corrective, even though she wouldn't be able to really hear it because of the NPD. And I interviewed Elisa Altman, who wrote a book called Motherland for Strandcast just last week. And it's about her relationship with her narcissistic mother. And I had said to her during the interview, you know, what I liked about the book is that even though you hardly say anything kind about your mother, we never end up hating her. Like you were able to write it that way. And she said, well, when I went into the book, because her mother's still alive as she's writing that she didn't realize that would happen over the 3 years. She didn't go into it thinking that, but she was able to write about her mother with compassion. And when she said that, I'm like, ding, 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 compassion. I got to write about my mother with compassion because I don't want her to be a villain. Like that was kind of my intention before, but like now it isn't. Like
It was your intention that she
would come off as a villain. And because I was thinking, well, how do you write about this person's done these horrible things, yet you want people to not really, I want people to walk away hating her.
Yeah.
And like having this, this is what I love about podcasting is that people say something that sticks with you. And like she said, compassion. I'm like, okay, I can now write this book with compassion for my mother. And I think that'd be a much better book that you walk away. It's like, okay, that was really shitty what Boyce went through.
Yeah.
But, he wrote it with compassion for this woman who has done like a lot of wonderful things for me.
Does she acknowledge that she has narcissism?
No, she does not know. Yeah, and she would never acknowledge it anyway.
Right.
That's what Elisa's mother
Will
said too.
a narcissist ever acknowledge that they
No,
are a
they
narcissist?
can't.
They can't, right?
It's mathematically impossible for them to do it. Yeah,
Right.
Because they never do anything wrong.
And is she still?
Yeah,
with
she's
us?
still. Yeah, she is very much so.
Does she listen to anything you do or read?
No,
anything you do?
and the reason why is because she thinks that only my books are important. So everything, my last book came out, 2005, 2006. So everything else that has happened
in the last 14 years.
yes, is irrelevant. Yeah. So it's like she doesn't listen to the podcast in like 4 years. So I actually don't have to worry about. She would find out secondhand before she would find out. Like,
but so she was invested in you being a writer.
Yes.
She wanted you to be a writer.
Yes, that's the important thing. Yeah.
Do you think that had anything to do with your walking away from writing or stopping writing?
It was like I really wanted to write, and I would try, and like nothing would come out, and I'm like, oh, Mr. Woo Woo. So I think I had to have the having the writer's block was good because it led me to the music. Because even though like the base of music or books or podcasting is that it's all coming from a place of being creative, and that's the most, like, I get to be creative. I was writing a book, interviewing people, that it all kind of feels the same to me.
Yes, but there's flow at different times in different whatever medium.
Yeah.
It sounds like you found a lot of freedom when you were writing music also. Like, it was flowing out of you.
Yes.
It's hard to find those records. I could only find them on CD Baby.
It's on Spotify.
Is it on Spotify?
I mean, one of them was on Spotify, and then on my SoundCloud.
Oh, on your SoundCloud. I didn't go to SoundCloud.
Yes.
But I did listen on CD Baby a little bit. And the first record, very produced. Very cool.
Yeah.
I hear all those influences, the Elvis Costello, the Morrissey,
How to Be an Adult.
And then the second record also, I saw you sort of starting to take this kind of DIY attitude.
Yeah.
Making it mostly on your iPad.
Yes. Yeah, so I made it on the iPad, and then I had a keyboardist come in, and he like augmented everything. Right. I'm not as happy with that came out, and I rushed it, and I should have took more time with it. But yeah, I definitely want to have like songs like I've demoed. So I definitely do want to make music. Again in the future.
Has talking to so many musicians and musical people, has that affected the way you think about how you would make music again?
Yeah, like I would like to have like some of my favorite people like play on the album.
Yeah,
like, that would be my goal. Like to have these songs, and then to bring in all these like amazing people I've met. And then I know what they do, and like how they would sound great on this song I wrote, and this person would sound great on that. So that's like definitely a goal, is like to use the people I've interviewed to be on my next album.
And what did you find when you were writing your songs? I mean, are you writing songs now?
I have songs I've written, but I'm not currently writing. But I have like a bunch that need to be released and produced and released.
I found that there was a kind of real honesty and real autobiographical flavor to me, it felt like, in your songs.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Did you feel liberated to say things in your songs that you weren't able to say in your... I didn't read your books, I'm sorry. I did not have time. But I mean, what were
they're all veiled autobiography. Yes. Like whether it's the books or the songs, I'm always was talking about myself. It was almost like it was safer to do it in that way. And also probably connected to my mother. It's like it's almost like when you parents a narcissist, they become like, you're married to them in some way, because they've like just gloom onto you, because there's no separation between you and them. And like I had to like separate myself more to like become more myself. So I'm like in the process of doing that now, like just pulling like low contact, as a psychiatrist would call it. And like doing that, and like to be healthier myself.
When you moved back to Pittsburgh after graduate school,
yes.
Did you move home?
Yes, I moved home, and I only knew about the narcissism, what it was, 3 years ago. So it was like all this like strange behavior, and like not knowing what it was,
and thinking it was you.
Yes, absolutely. Very insightful, Leo. Yeah.
Thinking it was you, meaning what, you thought you were supposed to change in some way? Or
that I was a bad son. Because if you have this mother who's doing all these this is what's so interesting in talking to Elisa Altman about, is that you have these parents who are doing these wonderful things. My mother sacrificed to put me through college. I never had to want for anything. And then you realize, that was all to make herself feel good. Like, this is what a great mother... It's almost like a performance. This is what a great mother does. A great mother sacrificed to put her child in college. A great mother gives her child anything she wants. And you realize, it was a facade, because it was never done for me. It was to make her feel good about herself. It was about... People would see this from the outside and be like, well, look, you're a wonderful mother. Look,
I started this conversation saying to you, it sounds like you had a lot of love and support.
Yeah.
Which you did in a way.
I knew something was off. Like, I didn't know why. Like, I never felt that parental child bond. And I didn't know why. So like I blame myself, like, well, she's doing all these wonderful things, it must be you. And then when you tell, I don't know, I think it's different, like if you say it like about your father, but when the archetype of motherhood, if you say to people, I'm feeling this icky way about my mother, right? Or she did this, that seemed weird, and people like, immediately, that's not true, that's your mom. Moms don't do that. You're being too hard on your mother. What are you talking about? That can't be true. You're over exaggerating. Like, nobody actually believes you when you're saying these things about your mother, even though they're true. So it makes you even feel more like, well, it must be, they have to be right. No one else feels this way about their mother.
So I'm crazy.
Yes,
I'm
crazy.
the one who's crazy.
Yes, and I didn't think found out I was not crazy until like 3 years ago.
Right. You said when your parent is a narcissist, it's especially your mother, it's almost like you're married to them.
Yes, yes.
Do you think that has had any impact on your social life outside of that?
Yes, because a narcissistic parent is emotionally unavailable. And so I would date people or attract people who are emotionally unavailable.
Thinking that's what intimacy is.
It felt natural. Yeah. And like even my best friend in college, she was a narcissist. Like looking back now, I'm like, oh my God, I became best friends with my mom. Because it was so comforting and natural. Like it's infuriating, but like it was exact. And I'm like, I can't believe I was friends with that person. I just repeated the relationship with my mom.
Yeah. Well, you know, when you do these interviews, it is all about them also.
Yeah,
and it is all about the person that you're talking. That's a very familiar thing for you. You know, like you make people feel very comfortable to make the story about themselves.
And yet, this is where it's different.
Yeah.
Because I've
you've been down this road.
Yeah. Is that narcissism is you're never the center of the attention. But like people have to, in an interview, they have to listen to me. Like, if we've agreed this contract, like I'm going to sit down, you're going to interview me. So I'm being heard in the conversation, or they can't answer the questions.
Yes.
So it's like actually an hour where I'm actually
being heard
and seen.
Yes.
Or they can't answer the questions.
Sure. Well, and that's a brilliant way of doing both, right? Of listening and being seen at the same time, or being heard at the same time.
Which is like what we all want. We want to, I mean, isn't it annoying? It gets worse and worse is that you're having a conversation and the new normal is that someone's, hold on, I'm just going to check this email. Like, 1 second. Okay, I'm listening. No, one second. And I have compared it to, if someone you're talking to just pulled out a book, would we accept that someone would pull out a book? I'm like, wait, I'm just going to read this one paragraph.
I'm not going to be able to go on until I read this paragraph.
This one, I'm sorry. Well, just one sentence. Yeah. Wait, that would be unacceptable.
Yes.
So it's like the greatest thing, I think, and I try to do that in interviews, is like to listen to people and that they're seen and heard.
Yes.
And that, because it's getting rarer and rarer that we get that.
Yeah. And I think it doesn't always go to catharsis, but sometimes it does. And it's like, what a strange thing to experience that with somebody and then go your separate ways.
Yes, that's weird.
We do give this to each other to sit down and turn our phones off, but chances are we may never see each other again.
Yeah,
I'm not saying that about us, but just often when you're in an interview situation,
that's the end of it. Yeah, like Mark Maron has talked about that. You think like, oh, we've made this bond, and then like after the interview, like, no, we didn't. Like it was just for that hour.
Do you roll on the entire experience, or do you stop the interviews at some point and have some chat after the conversations are?
Well, that's the thing. When I'm going to people's homes, I still say, we're saying goodbye. Oh, this was a pleasure. Thank you for doing it. And then it's like, well, I'm still in your home for another 15, 20 minutes while I break down my equipment.
Yeah.
So that can be like, it's less awkward for me afterward because now it's like, well, it doesn't matter what we talk about.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you ever have those experiences where you say something after the thing is over that you wish you would have captured?
Well, they were in a horrible car accident, and it's like, I didn't see that anywhere in my research of them, right? And then they start talking about it like, I'm breaking down. I'm like, what? How did this not come up that you were in this? Where you possibly couldn't have had your music career? And I was like, yeah, right. Like wonderful to talk about, like how you made it through and all that stuff. Yeah, but that's probably like the biggest thing. I'm like afterwards, I'm like, that would have been perfect.
I missed something.
Yes,
to have worry that you missed something.
Yeah, because I would try to like do an interview that I don't have any, like a bad interview for me can be like if I didn't ask a question that I wanted to. So that's why I always try to ask the question that I want to, like every question.
Yeah, but as you said, I mean, you're not, you're also not looking down at 20 questions necessarily trying to hit them. So it's like you have to balance both of those.
Yes,
right?
Yes. Like in that moment, like any question that comes up, like, okay, yeah, I'm going to ask that.
I'm going to do that one.
Yeah, I'm going
to do that one.
Yeah, unless I think the question and like, nah, you better not. Then I won't ask that question. Right.
Do you have a wish list, like a dream list?
I want to interview Tina Turner and Madonna and Kanye. Those are my dream. Because I don't feel like they've ever been given like really proper interviews, especially like with Tina and Madonna. That you see this a lot with female artists is that people don't necessarily ask them about the craft. so much so they get asked about everything else. So like for Tina Turner, it would be like, you're so young looking, like, and that's the conversation.
Right.
And it's like, okay, yeah, she is, but that doesn't help her make a great record, right? That doesn't make her have a great performance, So it's like being able to get the questions that talk about the craft. Like Tina would, like one of my favorite albums of hers, Live in Europe. And you listen to the album, it's like over 2 hours long, and there's like tons of covers, right? But you never feel like you're listening to cover songs because she has arranged them to make them a Tina song that you don't even think about the original art. And it's like, let's talk about that. Like I would love to talk to her about that. Like just the craft of
what makes something a Tina Turner song.
Yeah. Like I didn't know the song the best was Bonnie, what's it? Total Control of the Heart. Tyler. It's a Heartache and Total
Eclipse of the Heart.
Yes. That was a cover song. She just came out with the song like 2-3 years before Tina, and it's like you can't even listen to the Bonnie Tyler song. Like Tina made it like an anthem of hers.
I think that's very interesting that you say that women are often overlooked in certain aspects of what they do.
Yeah. Everything but
the thing that you're actually doing.
Yeah.
I noticed that you also, you're very diverse on a lot of levels with who you talk to, not only in terms of genre, but, you talk to a very broad cross section, men, women, people of different backgrounds. It seems like a very diverse kind of collection of people. Are you mindful of that? Are you thoughtful about it?
Yeah. It's very intentional. Because I think you listen to some shows and it's like, why does everyone look the same?
Yes.
Right? And it's like you actually have to be intentional. Like that's not going to happen by accident.
Right.
We kind of just may be drawn to our interests, and those interests may look like us. So like you actually have to be intentional. Like, okay, you've had 5 shows in a row with men, boys, you need some women artists. Like, work on that. Like, just keeping it diverse. And it's like, I'm not often working so far in advance. So whatever shows come up next to each other, but like, it's nice if I have 4 shows in the can.
Does that ever happen?
Occasionally. So that's nice.
Yeah. I mean, the idea of having 4 in the can, I feel like I would just go to like Mexico or something. Like, that's amazing. I don't know how to do
luxury.
Anything. Yeah. Incredible. Do you think that I mean, are you going to actively pursue that? Like trying to get to Tina Turner? Is that a thing that you think you could do?
I'm kind of, actually, you say you're getting the scoop.
Yeah.
I have, the Tina the musical was coming to Broadway.
Yeah.
It's in previews this Saturday.
Yeah.
So I did approach Flydia Lloyd. She's the director. I approached her people to do an interview with her, and they did get back to me and just wanted to know how long did I want. So that looked like it's probably, like they didn't say no.
Yeah.
They just wanted like, timeline and how long. And so I'm hoping from there that I'd be able to, because she's there was a New York Times article on her a few weeks ago, and she's definitely coming for the Broadway opening. Like she hardly ever leaves Switzerland, but she's going to be in New York for the show for the opening night. So I'm hoping that I could. So that would lead to.
So you had those 3; those were ready. Madonna, Tina Turner.
Yes,
and Kanye.
yes. Those are on my. I practice Nichiren Buddhism like Tina Turner, and that is on my chant list is to interview them.
Tell me about that practice.
I started because of her, and it's like I've always known about it. I've read the first memoir, I, Tina, and saw What's Love Got to Do with it.
Yeah.
And for some reason, I never investigated any further. And it's like I've always been like a spiritual seeker kind of guy. I meditate. I like read spiritual literature. And it wasn't until her second memoir, My Love Story, came out last October. And I didn't read it till November. And I was just like, wow, that's like really, it's like it just hit me. Like, things come to you when you need them. And I'm like, well, let me Google that and see what Nichiren Buddhism is about. And it sounded like really appealing to me and would fit in with what I already. It's about, that you're in the line with the flow of the universe, and you're like attracting qualities that you would like in your life and dreams you would like fulfilled. And she had used this to help her, get out of her abusive marriage with Ike. She used it to, she's a middle-aged woman, wanted to be a rock star. She wanted to sell out arenas and stadiums like the Rolling Stones and Rod Stewart. And yet she hadn't had any hits as a solo artist in like 7-8 years. So everything she wanted was like impossible, or looked impossible. And yet she still believed that this could happen, and the chanting was something that helped her. And I felt like it would be the thing to sort of push me further along in my goals. So like in January this year, actually today is how many months is that? I started January the 9th.
It's 10 months.
Yeah, I've been chanting twice a day without missing a session.
How long do you chant for?
The minimum is I do 5 minutes. So I do 5 minutes of chanting. I meditate for about 5-10 minutes, and then like I have like affirmations. I would like to see like one of them. I had to interview Tina Turner. That's one of them.
Every day,
twice a day when I wake up and then before I go to sleep. Yeah, I feel like it's like suiting. Life is hard. Life is challenging, and you need to have something to like armor you up to go out into the world. And it's like my natural inclination is to be a upbeat, positive person, but if I don't keep my eye on that, I can like sort of sway into depression. And I think part of the probably reason too why I keep so busy with everything is like that keeps me from being depressed.
Yes.
It's like if I'm doing stuff I love.
Yes.
And like everything related to the podcast I love.
Yes.
So it's like easy. Like if it means I'm staying up late, it's because I love what I'm doing.
Yes. See, it's interesting. I did not know that about you, although it doesn't surprise me because, you know, you talk about the mindfulness aspect of doing interviews and the focus that's required to do that. And I think that is related to a meditation practice.
Yes, very much so.
Being able to be in the moment. Like that.
And not thinking about like, oh, whatever, what am I going to do today and all that. And I don't know how you could do it otherwise. Like to do it properly, like how your mind could be anywhere else other than the person sitting across from you.
I don't know either, but I get the feeling that does happen, you know?
Because I couldn't be able to, like, it's like if I'm having a regular conversation with someone, I can forget what I want to say, but like in the interview, I remember everything pretty much. Like I can remember the questions. If I have like 2-3 questions lined up in my mind, I remember those. If they said something half hour ago, I can remember that. And it's like in a regular conversation, it's like you don't need that kind of concentration.
Do you remember the conversations after they're over?
I remember like bits and pieces, or like maybe almost every interview I can remember like what I got from that interview, that type of thing, or how it made me feel. Yeah.
Do you feel like you're aware of that when it's happening or when you listen back to it?
A lot of it's like there's 2 views of the interview. There's like when I listen to, I'm doing the interview, and there can be like, wow, this is going great, right? Yeah. And then there's interviews where I'm like, like I was telling somebody, look at his gold, silver, and bronze. You know, like I love Oprah, but every interview wasn't gold. That's okay, right? And it's like there's interviews that feel gold, and then there's other ones that are bronze. Yes. You know, I'm not ashamed of them. And I may feel it's a bronze interview sometimes or silver one, like, and then I listen back to them, like, oh, that wasn't as bad as, I'm okay with that.
I feel the same way, and I also feel like, you know, there's that balance between knowing that you need to be consistent and putting out interviews regularly because you've told your audience that you will. Yeah. And so you're going to have to put out a bronze every now and then, you know. Yeah. But then the other thing that's surprising is sometimes people will say, oh, I really liked such and such an interview. And that one to me is like definitely on the low end of bronze, you know?
Isn't that weird? Like, because you never, that's why I put them out. Because it's like, well, unless I just think it's flat out horrible. Yeah. And there have been a handful of interviews I've not released. Have you done that? Yeah. And it sucks. I had to tell someone that, and they would not they totally took over the conversation, and they were boring. Yeah. And I had to tell them, like, afterwards, I'm like, I'm sorry. And I phrased it nicely, you know, oh, I don't think it's going to be a fit for the, and they like hounded me. Well, can you give me the interview anyway? And then if I cut out, I'll cut your part out. And I thought about it. I'm like, yeah, I'm not comfortable with you having the interview. Like, I'm not giving up the file. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. No, it's yours.
Yeah.
It is yours. You have this little line in your biography on the website about fashion, about how fashion was also part of something that was influential to you. Is that still something that is part of your life?
Yeah, I love, like, my new obsession over the past few years is eBay. Yeah. Yeah. So anytime someone's asked me, oh, boys, I like your shirt. Where'd you like eBay? Like
it's all eBay.
Yeah, the shirt I'm wearing now, eBay. It's like you just find great stuff that people are trying to get rid of, and you don't have to pay a lot for.
It's so funny though, right? Because you're like, you know, you live in New York. You work at this iconic bookstore, and you're talking to all these like iconic musicians, and you're super into fashion. Where'd you get the shirt? eBay.
eBay, yeah. It doesn't seem sexy, but you can get stuff, and you don't have to worry about like fast fashion. You don't have to worry about anybody else. Like, oh, why am I on the subway with somebody who has the same shirt? You never have to worry about that. Right. And there's like unique stuff and like old rock t-shirts, which I'm obsessed with. They fit better, like an 80s one. Yeah. They just fit better. And apparently we've gotten fatter because an extra large from the 80s fits like a small or a medium.
Right. I think we have gotten fatter.
Yes. It's crazy. So you learn this on eBay. Have you done it?
Not apparently
you have to
enough.
know like pit to pit dimensions of a shirt. So like I'm 18 inches. from pit to pit.
I got it.
So that's how you sort of judge if something's going to fit, because depending when it came out, you can't go by, oh, I wear a medium.
Right.
Yeah, I wear a small. Like, well, no, not necessarily. In the 80s, you didn't.
And do you feel like ideally you'd like somebody to ask you where you got this thing? Like you're wearing...
Yeah, I do like that. Yeah. eBay. And like now people are like, you got that eBay. Like, yeah, I did. Yeah. Like I have a vast Tina Turner t-shirt collection, and every single shirt is from eBay. Yeah.
I mean, I know you said Tina, Madonna, and Kanye, but it seems like Tina is...
Yeah, she's been the reason. Like the other two had always been there, and I've always loved Tina. But once I read the book, it just like... It's more like not just the music, it's the spiritual part. Yes. And like, I think I needed someone in my life to inspire me, like to keep going and not give up. And like, she's been that for me. Yeah.
Do you chant to Madonna also?
There's an app that has it says Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, and like I chant. It's like a man and a woman saying it, so that's why I use the chant. Because in the beginning I'm like couldn't get the pronunciation right, and then I discovered this app, so that's what I actually chant to.
I see.
Yes.
Oh no, I meant do you chant for them? Okay. For Madonna, not to
Madonna.
Yes,
I chant to interview her. Yes.
Yes, you do.
Yes, and Kanye.
I will tell you, I feel like I'm talking. See, I know that this is for your podcast, and I feel like I'm talking so much.
No,
but
go ahead.
I want to tell you things though. So my wife and I met in a Madonna cover band.
Really?
In Wisconsin.
Okay.
Years ago, and she was one of 4 people who played Madonna, and I was a guitar player in the band. And I said to her, cockily, arrogant, you know, if you stay with me, one day I will find a way for you to meet Madonna, because she's a huge Madonna fan. And I can't do it.
Can't crack the nut to get.
She's probably the hardest nut to crack that there is. I'm not saying you can't do it. I think you should. That's why I want to make sure you're chanting, because
I'm absolutely. I think I didn't expect to get this far. I'm like 1 degree of separation from Tina. So I didn't expect that. Yeah.
Do you have favorite episodes or memorable episodes that stand out? It's hard.
Most recent is the Sir Ari Gold one. Yeah. Because I didn't like that. I knew he had his remix album, because he texted me back like, well, I want to talk about my remix album. I'm like, okay, of course. That's your newest project.
Right.
And I can't remember what the opening was. And so, but for him to talk so openly, because right before we aired, or it might be on air, where he says, ask me anything. And I'm like, oh yeah, I love when people say that. And he was completely open. And like, that's another thing, like why I wanted to do this with you, is that so many guests are so open with their lives. And I'm like, well, I should do that too and see what that feels like. And it's like, it's not the end of the world. It actually feels great.
What does it feel? Does it feel good?
Yeah, it feels good. Yeah, because it's like to talk about yourself for an hour.
Yeah.
You're not seen as selfish or narcissistic.
I suppose that's true, right? Yeah. For you, particularly when you grew up around a narcissist, to understand that there's a difference between talking about yourself in an interview and being a narcissist 24/7.
Yeah, it's a different thing. But so that interview, the Carlos Dangler, Carlos D from Interpol. Yeah, I'm proud of that one. I'd have to look at a list.
I know.
Yeah. But there's like different reasons. Like there's what's his name? I'm drawing it. His group is called Ajoyo. Yassin Balaris, I think that's his name. And like, I admit I had my judgmental views of of atheists. Yeah. And like, he's an atheist, and we had a wonderful conversation. And I got to talk to him about it, and it just like, just blew up my world and opened my mind. And it's like, that's what I love about conversation. Like this one person can change your mind about a way or a thing you've had for years. Yes. Right? Like one person can do that. Like that's incredible.
You went in with a preconception of what it might be like, because you have views about atheists, and he's a publicly he's an open atheist.
Well, that's the thing. It's one of those things that's not. It just came up. That's why I love the things that aren't in the press release, aren't on the website, and like in the interview, you find out he's a narcissist. Yeah. Like I love that. Yeah. Or to talk about someone, I've always hated math, but I talked with Dougie Poole, and he tutors math to kids. And we had a wonderful, probably 10 minutes of the conversation was talking about math. Yeah. And like, if somebody's passionate about something, you can talk about anything. Yes. Even if you previously weren't passionate, had no desire to talk about it, that hearing people talking about something they're passionate, people just light up. And it's one of those things where people think like, You want to hear this? Are you sure? Like, I get that. Like, this is interesting. This is okay. I'm like, no, I wouldn't keep asking you questions about it if I didn't think it was interesting.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, you said that, your worst fear in an interview is to walk out and feel like you missed something.
Yes. So, or I didn't ask the question I want to ask.
Right.
Yeah.
What am I missing here?
So it's different being on the other side of it.
Yeah.
Because I told myself, okay, I'm going to give up control to him. I'm not going to try to control even though as fellow podcasters, I may know what you're thinking or doing. Right. But to give up control of that. Yeah. And the preconceived notions, like to come in with no preconceived notions.
Isn't that hard? I think that is
I've gotten
hard.
better at it. Yeah. Because I've had like people where, have you had this, the people who like just setting up the interview is just the most challenging, difficult thing in the world, and people, like I've had people like confirm like 1:00 the night before, and like I've gone in like with an attitude and like, I can't believe they 1:00 at night. Why the hell did I come to this interview? And had something like, okay, I'm gonna let this go, and had like some of the best conversations with people. But then like someone, Antonio Sanchez, is like, we wrapped up, I emailed him.
Yep.
15-20 minutes later, he emailed me back. We set up the time a week later, and it was as simple as that.
Yeah.
And he's a busy guy.
Yeah.
And then other people, it's like pulling they say yes, and then like trying to schedule it together is impossible.
Yes.
Yeah. So letting go of preconceived notions is like one of the best things you can do.
I think so. Well, and I admit that I felt a certain responsibility or pressure before this one because I wanted to do right by you for this, and I want to represent you for you. And I think that's like a thing to let go of also, is to realize like, I just want to make sure that you tell your people and, whatever you've been waiting, holding out on them about. I feel like I learned a lot about you tonight, but I know that there's so much more. But, I think we're going to, at episode 300, we're going to have to come back for it.
That sounds lovely. Yeah.
Well, boys, congratulations, man.
Thank you, Leo.
It's really a pleasure to meet you, and I just love what you do, and I learn from you. When I get a chance to hear your episodes, and I'll see you at episode 300.
Sounds good. Thank you, Leo.
Thank you. There he was, my friends. Boice. What a pleasure to meet a fellow podcaster, another creative searcher, somebody who's on a similar path, and to be connected in this community. Also, boys, congratulations on 200 episodes. Here's to at least 200 more, or however many you want. I'll be back again soon with another deep dive. Until then, I'll talk to you soon.